Yeah, thanks for the applause. Welcome to my talk. A disclaimer first, I planned this with 15 seconds per slide in mind, so I have 5 extra seconds now on every slide. It's going to be perfect. Wonderful, yeah. I'm going to talk about SRE, ideology, concepts, practices. Just want to give a short introduction because this is a monitoring observability conference. Maybe not everyone has heard of this yet. A few things about myself. I'm Daniel Bodky. I'm with NETWAYS here as a consultant since 2021, and I work with things like Kubernetes, Ansible, Prometheus, GitOps engine, stuff like that. So naturally, I became interested more and more in the DevOps and SRE practices and ideologies. I adopted some concepts and want to give a short overview now. I want to start with a short explanation. S is for site. In the beginning, it was the site google.com because the whole concept originated at Google. These days, of course, it's all the services SRE teams provide to their end users to consume at many companies different from Google, of course. R then is for reliability, which is the ability of a service to perform as expected upon request, which is not the same as availability, because a service can be perfectly available but not reliable, for example, by serving errors of 500 web server errors or something to its clients upon request. And E then is for engineering, which hints at the fact that members of SRE teams are not mainly system administrators anymore, or not even system engineers, but they are first and foremost software engineers, implementing software solutions for operating purposes. And this is an important fact to keep in mind. For example, at Google, SREs spend at least 50% of their time engineering software and not doing operations work. And this is reflected quite well in this quote by Google engineering VP Benjamin Sloss, who's also kind of the founder of Google SRE, who said, "At Google, common to all SREs is the belief in and aptitude for developing software," that's important, "to solve complex problems like we see them in operation, especially in day 2 operations." To sum up the introductory part, I summed up some responsibilities here and highlighted the ones related more closer to monitoring and observability, for example, performance and efficiency of the provided services, monitoring them, emergency response, and so on. And the first of 3 topics I want to dive into a bit deeper now is SLIs, SLOs, and error budgets. So even today I heard the terms SLIs, SLOs, SLAs even a few times. So what are they? I want to start with SLIs. It's short for service level indicators, and it's like key metrics of your services, most often from a user perspective. So metrics you can judge the healthiness and availability and reliability of your services by. SLOs then are the server level objectives, and they are like the target levels you want to check your SLIs against. So as long as you're better than your SLOs, you're fine. And this difference, which is like shifting, right, is your budget you can spend on, for example, riskier feature releases and stuff. For this to work, though, you need to collect metrics. And you might think you need to collect lots of metrics, but that's not true. Of course, it's nice to have lots of metrics, but for your SLIs, it's actually the other way around. Keep it short and simple. Choose key metrics which are instantly understandable and which your users care about. Once you found your SLIs and identified them, it's a good thing to generalize them across your organization. Find sane defaults, promote them so everybody knows the implicit meaning of the SLIs when they see them on a dashboard, for example. So you should look at things like aggregation intervals, methods, regions. Do you take a cluster? Do you take a whole availability zone? Whatever. And that's it for SLIs, SLOs, and error budgets. Next up is dealing with toil, which is big part of SRE's day-to-day work, I would say. And here it's the same again. Before applying and mitigation practices or dealing with toil, actually, you need to identify it, right? So what is toil? Toil can be defined as a recurring and boring task that doesn't really lead to long-term benefits. So perfect example are so-called automated tasks which make the SRE run a script or something to trigger them. This is toil because even though the task is automated, you need to trigger it manually. Something which is not toil, though, is refactoring code or handling incidents because you can learn from those situations and gain long-term benefits. Once you identified your toil, you want to manage it. So you need to distribute it evenly across the team. It goes without saying, nobody should drown in toil. You need to handle it immediately if possible, otherwise it will stack up. And you need to chip away at it. You need to really keep managing the toil and keeping it low, because of course the long-term goal is minimizing toil, but as we will see later, it's not always possible to get completely rid of toil. So how to minimize it then? You can minimize it by keeping needed maintenance low, by developing highly automatic systems, not automated, that's the thing where you still need to trigger it. And you should have a shared mindset that some toil is completely fine, it's inevitable really, but too much toil is unacceptable. And the last thing I want to look into is being on call, because this is a special kind of toil, and there was a great talk right before lunch about incident management. So basically all I do now is repeating some of the points being made there. And the one thing we need to agree on, we need to be clear of, is that on-call is toil, and it's a natural lower bound to the total amount of toil each SRE witnesses, because if you have an SRE team, there's probably some on-call rotation in place, and if you have 3 people, logically every single member of the team will end up with 33% on-call time, right? So this is the lower bound, you can't reduce it any further, and you need to keep this in mind when taking more toil upon the team. Then there's the question of balancing. How many incidents is a good amount of incidents? And at Google, for example, that's 2 incidents per on-call shift. That's because they found more incidents and handling becomes error-prone and hasty, and there's no time for post-mortems and so on. And less incidents, and they just waste an engineering's budget on sitting there doing nothing, basically. So a few things I want you to keep in mind with ending my talk are: let your SREs engineer and not just operate. I mentioned in the beginning at Google it's at least 50%. They need to engineer at least half of their working time. You need to stay on top of your SLIs and SLOs and act if you are getting close to breach them. And for that, first and foremost, you need to staff your SRE teams sufficiently. Anyhow, there's so much more. I could have talked about incident management. Luckily, I did not, because there was a much better talk before lunch. There's engineering for automation and so on. So maybe there will be another talk, and I'll see you next time.